Okay, great. So now we're recording. So like I said,
Perfect.
my name is Janine, and I wanted to ask, did you have a chance to sign the consent form yet? Lauren should have sent it out.
I thought I did. And if not, you can send it over to me and I will sign it. I don't have anything to hide in my background, thank God. So
Okay. Okay, so I'll have Lauren
sure. If
send
he
that out.
hasn't, if he doesn't have it, have her send it over and we'll sign it and send it right back today.
Okay, so you
Okay.
make sure you consent to this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Not a problem.
Okay.
Not
Okay.
a problem.
All right. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, excuse me, is to state your name and spell it out slowly.
Sure. My name is Frank, middle initial L, last name Fekete, F as in Frank, E, K-E-T-E.
Okay. Okay, so today is June 2nd, 2021. The purpose of this meeting is to celebrate St. Peter's 150th anniversary. So welcome. I'm so glad we have the opportunity to talk about you and your time at St. Peter's. To start, can you tell me a little bit about your childhood, like where you grew up before St. Peter's and your family?
Sure. I grew up in Jersey City on Lexington Avenue. My mother and father, my father drove a Wonder Bread truck. My mother was of Italian descent from Italy. Her parents had come from Italy. They were born and raised in Jersey City, as a matter of fact. I have three brothers. I have an older brother, Ken, and I have two younger brothers, Arthur, who's 2 years younger than me, and my brother Bob, who's 7 years younger than me. So we grew up in Jersey City on Lexington Avenue in an apartment building on Lexington Avenue. We, as I said before, my father drove a Wonder Bread truck. There were 4 boys. We did not have an excess of money, but we had a lot of love. We had a lot of good food on the table because my mother being Italian. And we had a lot of faith in the house. We were parishioners of St. Aloysius Church on West Side Avenue in Jersey City. When I say went to church every Sunday, most Sundays we went to church. You didn't have virtual masses back then. And I grew up I went through St. Al's Grammar School. I went through grammar school at St. Aloysius through the 8th grade. I then went to St. Aloysius High School. I graduated in 1969. So I was St. Al's all the way through, as were my brother Arthur was also there. My brother Bobby, my youngest brother, was not, because by then in 1971, my parents moved out to Lyndhurst, New Jersey, into a house. They were able to buy a house and they purchased their first home. And my family and we all moved out to Lyndhurst, New Jersey.
And was there a particular reason you decided to come to St. Peter's? What was it that brought you back to Jersey City and St. Peter's?
Well, we were one of 4 boys, as I said before, so we didn't have the money to go away to school. So you went to school. If you were going to go to college, at least me and my older brother, Kenny, was also a graduate of St. Peter's College. You went to St. Peter's College nights. That's where we went. It was Catholic. It was Jersey City. As you know, my brother Kenny had gone there, and then I went nights because we couldn't afford for me to go day. They couldn't afford to pay their tuition or anything like that. So what I did was I had a job, and I worked construction during the day. And at night, for the first couple of years, I went to St. Peter's College. Then what happened was I met a girl who became my wife eventually. We were high school sweethearts. She went to St. Aloysius Academy. She went to a secretarial school in New York. And I was working construction, trying to make money to go to college because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And as I told this when I was fortunate enough to be honored by the Hearts and Minds Gala and to receive an award there. The reason I became an accounting major. And what happened was one day I got, fed up with, working in construction. So I went into New York. I met my wife for lunch. Drove in, and she said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I quit my job." She said, "What do you mean you quit your job?" I said, "I quit my job." She said, "How could you quit your job?" She goes, "You're never going to be anything." I said, don't worry about it. I said, "By the time I pick you up after your work," because she was working in New York then, I said, "I'll have another job." And I got a job. I bought the New York Times classified ad section, and I was looking in it. I didn't know what, so there was a job for an accounting clerk in New York, Interpublic Group of Companies. It was an advertising agency up on Avenue of the Americas and 54th Street. I didn't know anything about accounting, but I went in and I bulldozed my way in. What happened was I bought the paper and I set up an interview for Monday. And over the weekend, I bought an accounting book at St. Peter's. And not at St. Peter. I don't know where I bought the book, as a matter of fact. And I read it over the weekend. So I knew enough of the buzzwords when I went to the interview on Monday. I bulldozed my way in and I got the job. It was a lot. I think they were paying $100 an hour or something, $100 rather a week, rather an hour, $100 a week. And I got the job. So this way I would be, and then I decided, well, I better go. My mother-in-law became my mother-in-law. She was my wife's, my girlfriend's mother at the time. That was my girlfriend before we got married. She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I don't really know." She goes, "Well, what are you good in?" I said, "I'm good in math," because I got the math award at St. Aloysius High School. She said, "Well, why don't you become an accountant?" I said, "Oh, okay, I'll become an accountant," because I figured this way, if I went and I became an accountant, and she was saying that, she would, put in a good word for me with her daughter. So I applied, I called my brother up, and I went to St. Peter's Knights to get an accounting degree. And that's what I did. And then I left construction and I left the job in New York, and I got a job with an engineering company in Oradell, New Jersey, Bergen County, Burns and Rowe. And I became an accountant there. I was in accounting there, and I went to school nights. I used to rush because we would get out of work at 5 o'clock, and I had to be at school. I think classes started at 6:15, and I would drive all the way down the turnpike from 6:15, from 5 o'clock to 6:15 just to get to class. And I went and I got my degree, my accounting degree at Knights at St. Peter's. That's my story. And my final year, I wanted to get married. And my mother-in-law and father-in-law said, "Well, what are you going to live on?" In Italian, there's a dish that all the peasants eat. It's called pasta fazool. It's pasta and beans. She said, "What are you going to do? You're going to live on pasta fazool?" She said, "You better get your accounting degree and get it quick and then get married." So my senior year, I went nights. This was when we had trimesters then for night school. I took 54 credits my final year. I went 4 nights a week from 6 to 10. So that got me 12 credits. I went for 1 class on Saturday, 2 classes on Saturday, which got me another 6 credits. So I got 21 times 3, what was that? That was 12. No, I'm sorry. That was 18 times. And then I took 1 course in the summer to finally get my degree, and I graduated that final year. And then I went to work at Price Waterhouse. I got hired by Price Waterhouse and started working for them. That's my story.
How did you manage all of this and work and take 54 credits all at the same time?
Janine, it was not easy. Yeah. I focused on, I think I had, in all my accounting courses, I think there was only 1 course I didn't get a 4.0. I think I got a 3.5 or something. So I concentrated on that. And then in the other courses, I got 2 5s, 3s, whatever, etc., just to get through. I was also, I don't know, they had something called the Spur Society. Of course, I forget what they called it back then. I got put into that. And all I did was I concentrated on the accounting and my business courses. And that's what I did. That was my life, just going to school because I wanted to get married and just to get through, through my final year and get my degree. That's what I did.
You said something else that I wanted to ask you about. You said that you wanted to get married. Were a lot of people in your classes getting married while they were in school? Because I don't
Yes, you see,
see
don't
that.
forget, I was going night school.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of the guys that were in
Mhm.
night school were married. As a matter of fact, at that time, then I met who became one of my dearest friends. He was going nights and he was married. He was already married. And we became good buddies. As a matter of fact, sometimes, I guess I shouldn't put this on a video about my career at St. Peter's. Sometimes we would cut the second class on if we were really hungry, because we didn't have a chance to eat. And we would go down. There was a place down on Glenwood and West Side Avenue. It was a tavern called Roddy's, Roddys. We would go down, cut our second class, go down, have a burger and a couple of beers, or go to an Italian pizza place that was on West Side Avenue right near there called the Ventos. I don't think either one of them are there anymore. And we would go get a sit at the bar, have a bar pie and a couple of beers. But most of the guys that I went to school with were married and they were trying to better themselves at night.
So your classmates, would you say most of them were men?
Yes, well, especially in the accounting courses. Yeah. In the accounting courses, we might have had like 20, 25 kids, young people, and maybe 2 or 3 were women. Most of them were men. As a matter of fact, when I started in the profession, when I started working for Price Waterhouse, I think we had a class of 18 people that started as first year people. One person was a woman. It was mostly men. Now today, more than half of the profession is women. So, and I have a daughter-in-law. I have 3 granddaughters. So I'm happy to see the transformation that we're finally bringing women into the profession.
That's great. My uncle is actually an accountant. And my little cousin, his daughter's trying to follow in his footsteps. So that's great.
Mhm.
So were you involved in any extracurricular activities?
No, I really didn't have any time for extracurricular activities. I was working, going to school nights. I think they had an accounting club, which we all joined because at that time there were 8 big public accounting firms. And they used to come to campus on what we would call career day. And they would interview students and you would hope to get an internship or a job with them. And it helped if you were in the accounting clubs. The accounting club helped get you the interviews. And it was run by, I think it was either Professor Greg Sinella, I'm going to give you some names, or Professor Teddy Resch, who I became very close with, Professor Teddy Resch. But no undergraduate extracurricular activities other than working and going to school and studying, because you had to study on Saturday, and taking 15 credits times 3 is 45, 9 during the summer. I mean, it was a load, let me tell you. It was a real load.
So tell me a little more about your professors. Is there
Sure.
something specific you remember about the professors that stands out to you?
Yes, we had very good, most of the professors at that time, they were adjunct or they were full-time, but they would also teach some courses at night. They were all working in the profession. They were all CPAs. There were 2 that really influenced my career. One was a man by the name of Victor Illinato. And he ran a tax course. And I believe that was the only accounting course I didn't get an A in. I think he gave me a 3.5. But I was so impressed by Victor Illinato, because to me, if I could have picked at that time, what do I want to be or who do I want to emulate in the profession? It was Victor Illinato. I really took a liking to Victor Illinato. Then there was another man by the name, he was an older gentleman, Theodore Resch, R-E-S-C-H. And Teddy Resch ran, the seminar for accounting. And he and I would go up there, and as I said, I wanted to really get a job and all. And I would go up there and work with him. As a matter of fact, I'd help him grade some papers, etc. And he, through that, and I helped him in terms of putting together the seminar and accounting course to get students ready, etc. And then eventually he recruited me to become an adjunct professor. And I was an adjunct professor at St. Peter's for, I guess about 4 or 5 years in the late 70s. I think I started like in 77 or so. And I worked for about maybe 5 or 6 years. I used to teach at night at St. Peter's in the accounting profession because I was so taken aback by Victor Ilanardo and Teddy Resch that I wanted to influence young people to go into the profession. So even when I was working at Price Waterhouse, and even then when I left and I joined a smaller firm, I wanted to teach and, interact with the young people and try to impart some of my experiences on them because I understood what they were going through, going at night. And so I really appreciated their efforts.
Were there many Jesuits teaching when you went at night?
Yeah, we had quite a few. There were a couple that I became very close with. Father Ed Heavey. Father Heavey was a Jesuit who got to know most of the guys because we were mostly guys at that time. And as a matter of fact, sometimes he would join us for a beer down at Roddy's or something like that. He was really a good guy. I never had him for a course. I had a Father McGraw in philosophy. I might have had Father Heavey once in philosophy, which is where I met him. But yeah, there were more Jesuits than we had now. There was a strong Jesuit presence on the campus at that point in time. As a matter of fact, there was a spaghetti dinner that we used to have once a year. It was the Art Cerruti spaghetti dinner, and the Alumni Association used to run it. And all the Jesuits, and it was always and after it, there was always a basketball game up at the Jersey City Armory. I don't think the Anatelli Center was really even open then, to be honest with you. And so we used to, even when I was a student there, through my brother, who was always part of it, he had graduated, we would be like the waiters at the spaghetti dinner, and the Jesuits would come, and then we would all walk. It was always in the winter, January or February. We would all walk up to the Armory and go watch a St. Peter's College basketball game.
It's amazing. I think the only Jesuit I know is Father Majewski. He was my theology professor.
Okay. Now we had quite a few. Can't remember their names much more. Anyway, I remember Father Heavey. I'll always remember him. And I knew, who was the other fellow that I knew? He went out to Newark to the Cristo Rey School. I can't remember his name now. But yeah, we had quite a few Jesuits. There was more of a Jesuit presence.
So I know we talked a little bit about your friendships, but can you tell me a little more? Do you still keep in contact with some of your classmates?
Well, not really. My friend, the fellow that I said became one of my best friends, unfortunately passed away rather young. He contracted encephalitis, brain encephalitis. And we were very, very close as we were with his kids. I baptized one of his children. Our wives were very close. I'm still close to his wife and the children. That was the one I really stay, in touch with. The rest of us, it's different than when you go days. When you go days, you're living together. You're here, at night. You're going to school. You're going to work in the day. You have a family already. A lot of your friendships are already, formed. But this one gentleman, Peter Mango was his name, Mango, Pete Mango. He and I became very, very close. And unfortunately, like I said, he passed away at a very, very young age. I think he passed away in 88 or 89. So he was only, 88, he was only 38, 39 years old, contracted brain encephalitis and passed away.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Sure, he's proud of you and what you're doing right now.
He probably wishes he could have a beer with me right now.
So what did you do after graduation?
I went to work for Price Waterhouse. I was an auditor with them. I became a supervisor and eventually then became an audit manager. And I was running the worldwide audit of, I was responsible for the worldwide audit of Ingersoll Rand and Mercedes-Benz North America. And I stayed with them. I was with them about 6 years, 6.5 years. Then I left and I joined a smaller firm, Milton Mandel and Company in Jersey City. And I joined here in 1981, October of 81. I became a partner in 82, and Milton passed away in 84, and I became managing partner of the firm. And I've been running my own firm, and I've been here since 1981, so it's my 40th anniversary on October 5th of 81 is when I started. What else do I do? I'm very active. For a while, I was active in Christ Hospital in Jersey City. I became chairman of the board there. I was on the board there for 23 years. I left there, I stepped down. After 23 years, I basically had it with healthcare. And I then, a couple of years later, I joined Hackensack University Hospital. I got involved through a friend of mine, a good friend of mine. And I also went on the board of St. Peter's University, St. Peter's College at the time. And I also went on the board of Provident Bank. It was Provident Bank at the time. We became a public company in, when did we become a public company? In 2003 or 4. And I've been on the board there for, a long, long time. I went on the board there in 1995.
So when you first graduated, were you working in the firm and teaching at the same time?
Yes, I was working at Price Waterhouse, and I was teaching at night. I would teach 2 nights a week from 6 to 10, I believe it was, or something like that, whatever the hours were. And yeah, and sometimes in the tax season, like I would only do 1 course because I was very, very busy with tax, but I was working at Price Waterhouse then. I was an auditor, then I became a supervisor, and then I became a manager, an audit manager with them. So I worked, and I went to St. Peter's at night. I would, grab it, but then it was a little different, because then if I was only teaching 1 course, or it was only 2 nights, I would go home the other nights, because then I had my first child was born in 1980, which was, I was still at Price Waterhouse when she was born. But I would go home and eat dinner with them 2 nights a week, and the other 2 I would go right to St. Peter's from work, and I would teach.
Wow. So did you end up getting married after graduation, or did you wait a few years?
No, we got married. We got married within a year after graduation, 1976. My wife and I, we were high school sweethearts. Like I said, we met on Valentine's Day in 1970. And so we were together, and for almost over 6 years. And then we got married in 1976, and we've been happily married since then. We have 2 children, a daughter who's born in 1980, so that makes her 41. And my son was born in 87, so he's 34 years old, and I have 4 grandchildren.
Congratulations on such a long and successful marriage.
Thank you.
So I want to go back a little bit and talk about the larger, maybe societal issues during your time at St. Peter's, and how that influenced the college, how that influenced maybe your community.
Sure. Well, what happened was, this was the time of the Vietnam War. This was the 60s, I graduated high school in 69. When I say the 60s, it was really the early 70s, but we were still influenced by the 60s generation. And it was the 70s, the Earth movement, all of that stuff. And the Vietnam War was very big. And we had student deferments at that time. If you were a student, and since I was taking a full-time load, you had a student deferment. And the deferment was lifted, because they lifted all of these student deferments. And instead what they did was they instituted a draft lottery. And everybody was assigned a number based upon, they did some sort of lottery. Your birthday assigned you a number. I received number 237. So anybody up to like number 180 might have gone. But once you got past 180, you had no, even though I had been called for a physical before when they lifted my deferment, when the lottery came out. So what happened was I went for my physical, I passed it. I was waiting to hear if I got drafted. They came out with the lottery. And so the Vietnam War was very, very big at the time. The drug culture was very, very big at the time. There was, the 60s, I don't even know what they called them, the yuppies, the hippies, the love, the lovebirds and all of this stuff, all of it. They were all out and living out in San Francisco and LA, et cetera, and New York. So that was the times. There were very tumultuous times politically in the United States at that time. There was a lot of unrest, people thinking we should be out of the Vietnam War. What are we doing in the Vietnam War? Boys are going to go over there and getting killed. I had a good high school friend of mine who got number 6, I believe, in the lottery. So he was gone and he went over to Vietnam. He served in Vietnam. And thank God he came back alive, but with significant emotional issues as a result of, what he had seen happen, people get blown up and things like that. The other thing that happened was we had the gas shortage, we had runaway inflation in the 70s. I mean, it was a real interesting time to grow up, I have to tell you. And that was the socioeconomic climate of the times that was going on back then. In terms of Jersey City started to change then. What happened was my office is down on the Jersey City waterfront. I look out my window and I see New York. Down here used to be desolate. All of a sudden there were factories, Colgate-Palmolive, Harborside terminals, they got knocked down. A significant amount of real estate development took place in terms of condominium buildings and high-rise office buildings, as well as eventually hotels and things like that. So in the 70s was the start of really, gentrification in terms of the city turning over in terms of what it became. It became a mini New York. And the selling point was we got the better view. New York's looking at us, we're looking at New York. We give you a better view. And Jersey City became a very, very popular site and destination for younger people to move into.
So I want to ask you 2 questions about that. The first is about Vietnam. Was there student protests on campus during the war?
There were. They weren't as, excuse me a minute. They weren't as vocal or violent as you saw like out in Kent. I don't know what it was at school at. I think it was Kent University, et cetera. There were much more violent and all out there. But there was some protests, there was sit-ins, sometimes the police were called, but there really wasn't anything that was, over the top. St. Peter's, you have to remember at that time, a lot of St. Peter's, the students there, most of the full-time students, we were known as a professional school, okay? A lot of doctors came out of St. Peter's, lawyers, accountants, economists, scientists. It was more of that type, and they were very serious about their education, and they came from basically, it might have been a blue-collar family, but it was a very heavy work ethic, responsible family that was really growing in terms of Jersey City. So you didn't have a lot of the younger breakaway. There was some, I can't say there weren't, but it wasn't as widespread as as you saw in some of the movies. If you saw it on the West Coast, you saw it in New York, et cetera. The other thing was at the time, a lot of we knew the police in Jersey City. They would walk our communities, okay? And they knew our families. And so a lot of times you didn't get into trouble because of fear that, Father Mike on the corner would see your father and say, hey, Luke, because that was my father's name. I saw Frank, and he was causing this and that. We had a poem. It was different back then. Jersey City was a lot different back then. I'm not saying it was better. It was just different. I think the whole country was different if you look at it. Back then when we watched TV at night, there weren't any of these reality shows. We never had a reality show. The reality show for us was like, Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver, the Donna Reed show. I mean, that's what you watched at night. One of the first shows that came out that really broke the image was a show called Laughing, where they would do all of these skits and make fun of politicians and things. You never even had that. Then in the 70s, in the mid 70s, Saturday Night Live came out. But prior to that, it was Jersey City was like a hometown, even though it was a city. There were communities. There was the Polish community. There was the Italian community, the Irish community. All the communities got along. There was a Black community. There was a Hindu community. There were all these various communities, but they were all communities, and everybody went. Generally, you might have gone to your own store or something, but you all saw each other. You saw each other at church. You saw each other at the temple. You saw each other at wherever, the mosque, wherever you went. It was Jersey City was. And still today, you can go, when you go down to, like I go down to the Jersey Shore a lot. I have a home down there. And you run into somebody from Jersey. Oh, did you know? I'll tell you, for instance, I went to our recycling center a couple of years ago. And I had a St. Peter's peacock hat on. The guy goes, you went to St. Peter's? I said, yeah. He said, oh, what's your name and all of this? I went to St. Peter's. He graduated a few years before me, but he started talking. Oh, did you know this one at Jersey City? Did you know that one? This one was on Gifford Avenue. This one lived on Bentley Avenue. This one was on Kensington Avenue. That's the type of community Jersey City was back then. Maybe it still is. We moved out, and I think 1980. I think I moved out of Jersey City, but it was that's the type of community it was.
So would you say that Jersey City was diverse when you went to St. Peter's, in the sense that, now when I'm in school, we talk so much about Jersey City's diversity, and I'm wondering if it's sort of similar, maybe it's different.
It's different. It's different. You had pockets of diversity back then, but mostly it was Irish, Italians, Polish. There were some Black areas. There were some Indian areas. But it was basically, it wasn't as diverse as it is now. And I think a lot of that has to do with because of the influence of New York. I think a lot of it has to do with, I believe a lot of people, you grew up in Jersey City. Like I said, we lived in an apartment. Why did my parents move out? Well, my parents hated to move out. They were leaving some of their friends. They wanted a house. They wanted a backyard. It was a small house. The backyard, it was, maybe 25 feet wide, but it was a yard. You know what I'm saying? So people, they viewed that as the country. They wanted to move to the suburbs. And I think when that happened, when there was a migration to the suburbs, and I think that started in the late 60s, 70s, I think that increased and had a lot to do with the increased amount of diversity within the city, because then city had a lot of apartments, and then a lot of diverse people came into and moved into the apartments. Then those, and eventually then the young people move in, and then they're going to move out. So it's a migration. It's a complete migration. I'll tell you, it's wonderful being on the board. I'm chairman of the board at St. Peter's, and the most things, like somebody once said to me, what do you enjoy most about being on the board at St. Peter's? I said, you know what I enjoy most? When I go back there and I have a meeting and I have some interaction with some of the students, I'm amazed at, and most of the students that we have are still first generations, the first of their family to go to school. And the quality and the diversity of the students, to me, that's what it's all about. It's, obviously we don't get paid for it. We we do it for the love of the school, but that's really what compensates you for being part of St. Peter's. And that's some of the things that I enjoy the most about St. Peter's is and that's some of it. It is the most important, is the interaction with the students, seeing all the students, seeing them come when they come and they do a performance, they'll sing a couple of songs at one of the board meetings. We'll have, some of them will come in, we'll present some awards to some of them. To me, it's, it's to me, that's tremendous. That's, I don't want to get religious on you, but to me, then you're doing God's work. You're educating, you're doing more for the young people, and you're helping to spread, okay, good fortune. I don't mean money in terms of education. You're spreading good fortune of education to all of these, to a lot of these kids that would not have the opportunity. And to me, that's the best part of it.
Thank you. So I actually do want to talk a little bit about your time on the board.
Mhm.
So to me, when I was given your bio, what stuck out to me was you went from being a student at St. Peter's to being chair of the board. And like, those are two completely different hats to wear. But how does it feel to go from being a student to being chair of the board? And do you think that your time at St. Peter's as a student really impacted the way that you look at your role and the way that maybe you even kind of relate to our students? Because I feel that your story and what you went through to get your degree, it relates a lot to some of our students today that are working maybe a lot of jobs and going to school full time.
I have the utmost respect for our students, especially, these first generation students, the students, like you said, that have to work for it. I went through it. I know what it is, okay? And I'm not saying that I did anything great, but when I see these students, and yeah, it brings back a little bit to me. It makes me proud that I started at St. Peter's, and if anything, if I could just impart upon any of the students something, is that to always remember where you started and how did St. Peter's benefit you? Because to me, I owe it all to St. Peter. I don't know what I would have done. I think I wanted to be, I was a pretty good athlete in high school. I wanted to be a phys ed teacher. And I remember my mother saying, what are you going to do? Play ball the rest of your life? I mean, you can't, she didn't know what a phys ed teacher. She goes, you got to go get it, and then my mother-in-law, and I would not have had the opportunities had it not been for St. Peter's. And I will never forget that. That's where I owe a lot to St. Peter's. I mean, and that's why I enjoy being on the board. And I would hope that the more and more we get to talk to students and they see that, I hope more and more of the students would say, you know what, at some point in time, and I know everybody's got a life, you got to raise a family, you got to have a family, raise a family, get a job, but I hope that some of our students would sit back and say, I'm going to remember that it was St. Peter's where I started, that I really, you went to high school, remember, but I really, really started to become an adult. I started to shape my life and look at what, no matter what you are, you don't have to be chairman of the board. You can be whatever it is. If it's an honest living, you're following the Jesuit principles, you're following, and that's the whole thing. It's the whole purpose, it's the whole purpose, of what you do in life. And I hope that some of them, even if it's not at St. Peter's, they're going to get involved in some way in their community. They may not live here. It may not be possible for them to be part of St. Peter's, but they're going to get involved in some way in their community and say, I'm going to give back because I saw what it did for me.
Okay, thank you. And I had another question for you actually
Sure.
about that. So when you were elected as chair, I was reading this online. You said that St. Peter's is in the midst of a renaissance. And I wanted to know, what did you mean by that when you said it? And do you still think that's true? Because I think right now everything is changing, but I just sort of wanted to dig
Yeah,
deeper in. Yeah.
yeah. What I meant by that at the time, Janine, was we were in the process of changing. Education was changing. The world was changing. We weren't anymore going to be just um, educating doctors, lawyers, accountants. Now we had to do, we got to have coders. We're going to have this. We're going to have occupational therapists. We're going to have that. The whole, everything of what we would, the job market, if you will, what was needed, excuse me, in the world was changing. Okay. We had to change. We had to change with that. Okay. We had to also recognize, well, when we say Renaissance, what were students looking for in an education? How many of the students could afford to go to college? You know, when I think about what college costs, and this is not just a St. Peter's problem, this is a problem across the whole country. If I don't take the average, what the average cost of tuition is $40,000 a year. Let's say it's 40,000. 4 years is $160,000. How many families can afford that? Wasn't that kind of money. I was very fortunate because when I got a job, I was working, but also my company was paying half of my tuition, half of my education. How do you afford? How do kids afford $160,000? You have 2 or 3 kids. How are you going to afford $480,000? So when I say Renaissance, we have to be able to provide scholarship funds or discounts, et cetera. We have to be able to provide education cheaper. We have to evolve this whole thing. And we're trying, and it's very, very hard because we're up against, and then you get hit with a pandemic, and then you got to move to virtual education. Then you have this, and you're fighting that. You've got, and then you have, where community colleges were coming. When I went to school, there were no community colleges. So now a lot of kids go to community college for 2 years. So they want to go there for 2 years, and then they're going to transfer in. So when I say Renaissance, education was changing. Then it wasn't just, years ago, all of the big, like I said, the 8 big accounting firms came on campus and they interviewed, and they would hire, 4 or 5 kids, each firm, 4 or 5 kids. Okay. Well, now it's a little different. Now the employers want experience. They just don't want you right out of college. So now we have to try to provide some practical experience. We have to try to assist in terms of career development and things like that. That's what I meant by in a Renaissance. Then also, a lot of kids back then would stay on campus. No more. Now, we've got, I forget the statistics, but I'll bet you more than half of our students are commuter students. Okay, different. So that means after your class, do you go home? Do you go to the library? What do things have changed. Things have really evolved. And that's what I meant when I said we're in a Renaissance, and we're still in it. We're in a constant Renaissance. And the schools and the universities that will be successful will remain committed to their mission, okay, and be cognizant of what's going on around them and try to really listen to and fit the needs of the kids that we want to attract.
Yeah, I think I've seen that, especially this year and being online.
Right.
Do you think, okay, let me ask you this. How do you think the pandemic is going to impact the future of St. Peter's? I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I do have, and I think we're as a board, we're looking into this. What are the housing needs we're going to have? How many students are going to want to stay on board as opposed to go home? What is the impact of technology in terms of education? We've learned how to bring technology into the classroom. How are we going to have to, how many students now are going to say, you know what, I don't want to go to every class in person. We think it's sad that they don't have in-person instruction, because I think that interaction, just like in a company, I think is very, very important. But by the same token, there may be some blend. How are we going to respond to that in terms of the pandemic? What happens if another pandemic hits? What happens in terms of how people are going to look for their jobs? Because we're going to have to train them a little bit more now in tech. And I know all young people are in great shape in terms of technology, but is it the technology of the future? That's something we're going to have to really be ready to help them respond and be able to find a position, a job, et cetera, that they're comfortable in, that they're qualified for under the new, whatever the new work normal is. I don't know what it's going to be, yet to be defined.
Are you gonna still be chairman of the board the next academic year?
Yep, I am. I wish you were still going to be there, but I'm happy. I'm happy you can do the job. And where do you want to go to law school, Janine?
So I'm actually between Seton Hall and Rutgers, and I
Good.
haven't made a decision yet.
Oh, that's
It's hard
great.
because I like
Good.
both schools. Yeah.
They're good schools. That's great. So I have a couple more minutes, and then I have a
yes.
meeting I got to go to. Okay.
Okay, so I think we could do a speed round because I have like
Sure.
maybe a few more questions. So what do you think the biggest impact that a Jesuit education has had on your growth? And what impact has being part of a Jesuit education had on your life?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think St. Peter's indoctrinates you, or when we talk about our Jesuit education, it puts something into you that you carry forward with you. You want to, like I said, serve community, the whole person. Okay. I think it really gives you something, even if you're not religious. You don't have to be religious. It gives you a sense of decency, et cetera. It ingrains it in you because it's there within. You look at our faculty, they have it. You don't stay as a faculty member at St. Peter's College unless you have some of it ingrained in you. Okay. And they impart that amongst the students: decency, community, okay, helping those less fortunate, charity, okay. I'm not even talking about religion. Forget the religion, because I think it does with the religion. I know it has in my life, but it gives you something. My son went, he went through Oak Knoll School of the Holy Child in Summit through 6th grade. Then he went to Del Barton. Then he went to Villanova undergrad. Then he got his master's degree at Georgetown. I see what it brings, and I think a lot of it has to do with how you're raised. I agree, it comes from the home, but I also think it gives you something inside of you that you carry forward. It's not just let me get a job, let me get a job, let me get a job. I think it gives you a little something extra. And I know I'm prejudiced, but I think our kids, our graduates, I think they have something special.
Do you think St. Peter's is an important institution of higher learning?
I think it's critical, especially in these times. The world, the world now is built on hate. I'll tell you, I live in Short Hills. I was walking down my block, I was walking my son's dog one day, and I saw on my neighbor's, and he's Asian, I saw on his lawn a sign, "Stop Asian Hate." He happened to be coming out, and I had never met him before. And I said, it pains me, I can't believe that we have to have a sign like this on a lawn in America in 2021. Are you kidding me? He goes, "You're right. It's really sad." He said, "I'm born and raised in America. So it's not like, I'm born and raised here. I'm American. And I got to put a sign like this on." And it's true. So I think now more than ever, when we look at this world and we look at the fight, and we look at the Black Lives Matter and this movement and that movement, and I don't want to get into politically whether they're right or wrong or this or that. Just the fact that we have to have these discussions right now. You brought it up before about the unrest in the Vietnam War in the 70s, and there was. So you might have said, gee, there was violence back then. There were violent protests. But it was America against a foreign adversary. You know what I'm saying? This is America against Americans. I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, so yes, I think in times like this, I think we need institutions, we need employers, we need companies, we need politicians that come out and preach decency, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, I don't care what you are. Decency, decency and respect. So yes, I think St. Peter's is very important.
Thank you. And for my last question, I just wanted to say, is there anything you'd like to share that maybe I didn't ask or we didn't talk about?
Well, I think you are a terrific representative of our students and our student body. And I am so proud, okay, to still be part of the St. Peter's community. And even after my term as chairman of the board and I go off the board, I still would be part of the St. Peter's community because I would still feel like I have the connection.
Thank you. That's really nice of you to say. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
I hope you had a great time during our interview.
I hope I did have a good time. I hope you have tremendous success in your future, whatever it brings. I wish you nothing but health, happiness. Okay. All right.
Right. And with that, our interview is complete.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye now.
40.